Hello, everyone. Welcome to another special edition. Aren't they all special? Coffee and Critique for week number 19. The challenge of the week was blue. I'm going to go through a couple of your photos here and just drop some knowledge bombs. But first, I want to thank our amazing supporters of the project. I just want to give a shout out to 3 new Patreon supporters, Julie, Lisa, and Anonymous. You can write Anonymous instead of your name if you would prefer. So I really just want to thank all of our contributors from the bottom of my heart. I'm in the process of hiring a full-time developer with the money that's coming in from your support to get our project off of Facebook and onto our own website, where we can do some really amazing things like follow our friends and sort our own special smaller albums, which I think would really enhance the community. So without further ado, let's jump into this special Coffee and Critique here. Tell me, can you see a pattern here? Can you tell why I picked out these photos from the Blue album? It should pop out at you. Let me select a couple more. Do you see it? I chose all the photos that had complementary colors, which in this case, for this album, would all be blue and orange, which if you've seen my video that I made about split toning and complementary colors, you'll see just how prevalent it is in film. As well as photography, and it really just it adds that special level to a photograph. And shooting in Blue Hour gives you a real opportunity to quite easily get this blue and orange, because the sunset, the remainder of the sunset, is going to be orange. So I don't really have a specific direction in mind for this screencast. I'll just pull up the photos and see what I feel about them, maybe give a little bit of insight into the complementary color, but let's see what happens. Okay, so the first thing I see with this is the image size. I do have a video on proper image size. In short, you want to go 2048 pixels on the long side. Here, looking up at the EXIF data here, it looks like 640 you have on the long side, which is really much smaller than the ideal. So that's something to keep in mind when outputting your photo. The other thing I would critique here is slow shutter. It looks like you have a bit of blur going on, and perhaps more care could have been taken to either putting the camera on a tripod or trying to shoot at a higher shutter speed. This is interesting. I think more in the abstract realm. I am seeing a little bit of I don't want to say blur, but it seems blotchy, maybe over processed, a bit creamy, not in a good way. Loss of detail. So you don't have any EXIF data here, but it does seem a bit over processed. It could be from saturation, it could be from noise reduction. Only you know. Street 74 JPEG. If you guys also name your file name with your name, like here, this has, instead of just an anonymous entry 366, we see William Richards. This we could see that it's Lauren. That's a little bit of a hint. I love this. This is a really great observation, a nice realistic image. I really like this shot. Good capture. And you know, to an untrained eye, I could see looking at this photo and being impressed with it, but not knowing exactly why, not knowing exactly what makes this a photograph rather than just a snapshot. And I think a big part of that is the complementary colors. Armed with this knowledge that a strip of orange coming through a overwhelmingly bluish composition will give it that smack, that pop, that to an untrained eye will just not understand why, but it makes it a quality image. So good job on spotting that. Great capture. I dig it. Maybe a little bit more detail, but really nice. Also, another great example, when you get this lining where the sun hits an edge at this hour, it's so easy to just contrast it with a dark bluer shadow. In this case, the underside of the cloud mixing with the blue of the water. It's just beautiful, beautiful time. I really love this image, and I think I placed it in the one of the top positions. And if I didn't, then it was a tough call because I was looking at this image for a while, and you really don't see orange at first glance, but it could be subtle. It doesn't have to be super obvious. But all along here, all along these edges, there is an orange tint. Everywhere this light is hitting, these highlight accents, and that really enhances the image even a little bit of compliment. But this is a really striking image. I love the leading lines. I love the slow shutter speed, getting the clouds moving in the background behind it. A little bit difficult to tell what's up, what's down, which I think adds to the composition for me. I don't know what else to say. This photo is stunning. I really adore it. Well done, Tampa train. Sorry. I really love this type of photo, that 2D storefront, just taking in the geometry of the scene. Looks like you're getting cut off a little bit over here, and your horizon line may be a bit askew, although I do see you mashed it to the top, so it could just be a incline of the street. I think your focus is less sharp at the top. It seems like your focus is more on the door here. It could use a little bit of detail, a little bit of richness in the detail. I feel like we're losing a bit either in the processing or in the glass that you're using, but really nice composition. I really like that one. Whoa. Very cool abstract. Trying to figure out maybe what it is. Is it a swirl in water with colored particles of something or other? I'm not sure if it's post-process. I mean, at first I thought obviously this is like a post, but now I'm trying to look at it. Anyways, it's interesting. I think these kinds of things deviate a little bit from perhaps the, more classical photographs. But this is an art project just as much as it is a photography project. I am a fan of the arts. I'm happy if you guys are out there and playing around with Photoshop or doing lens whacking on your camera or just thinking outside the box. At the end of the day, we want to access this part of our brain that makes us happy, and that helps us to create. And however you do that, whatever medium you use, I commend you. So I don't know what this is, but I dig it. Good colors. Also, a stunning example of blue and orange. A little hot on the orange. It's a little bit jarring. Could use a slight desaturation, but I think really nice tones all around for that one. This is, I have to, sorry to call you out. Let's see if we have a name here. No, I'm going to stop looking. To me, and I think once you spot this, once you're armed with this knowledge, you start to see it pop up more often. But to me, this looks over-processed, and the dead giveaway is what's called a halo effect. And you can see in high contrast areas when an image is over-processed, specifically with clarity, that an HDR type of filter, you'll see in high contrast areas a lighter halo that's around the edge. So you can see all along here, it's brighter going around the image, closer to the image than the background that it's sitting on. You could see it a bit also here, the trees. It's actually not that noticeable in some of the other edges, but I mean, like, look right here. Look at the building. Look at the orange of the building here, and look at the orange of the building here. Why is that so white? And if you zoom out, you see there's like a white halo around this water fountain here. And when we zoom in, you see the people here, a little bit heavy on the processing slider. And again, I think it's cool. I think it's a cool photo. I think maybe you want to print this and put on your wall. It's funky. you're giving the photo a lot of your own character, and I commend you for that. However, with that said, I do need to say that it does depart somewhat from what we're talking about, a classic photograph, which should be more photorealistic. And in this case, you're departing from that. You're entering more into mixed media, abstract territory. For the sake of this project, 52 frames, probably won't receive a something like a top 3 honor, because it's a bit of a departure from like the photography that we're looking for. But I don't mean to say that you shouldn't do it, because if this is the type of processing and photography that you like, have fun, go with it, So that is that. In general, I find it difficult to critique a photo when it pops up and it's really small. So you're doing yourself a disservice by not outputting your photos to at least 2048 pixels wide on the long side. That's really what you want to target. But another excellent example of this blue and orange. Anytime I see this time of day, orange just shining on the side of a building like this, it warms my heart. It's just a beautiful moment. It's my favorite time of day, and it's just a great capture here, especially very dramatic with the cross here and the statue. I wish we could see this in more detail. Another nice example here, similar type of scene. This image does look a little bit soft. Looks a little bit soft, a little bit grainy. Looking ISO 1600 on a Olympus EPL3. Let me Google that real quick. Looks like a really nice, fancy point and shoot, but I think 1600 may be pushing this camera. It's not a DSLR. You have to know your limits for your camera. I highly recommend all of you out there who are not sure what ISO is and what ISO noise or grain is, go do a bunch of test shots. Okay, put your camera on auto or on P, where you can change the ISO and it'll calculate everything else automatically, and start at 100. Then go to 400, then go to 800, 1600, 3200, etc. And then slap those photos on your computer and zoom in and see what is happening. And at some point, your camera's sensor cannot keep up with this so-called film sensitivity, the ISO, which is now the sensor's sensitivity to light. And it's just good to know. So some cameras over 800, like, don't bother. Like, keep it to 800, 1600, 3200. It starts getting so noisy and grainy that it's just not worth it. You know what? This would be a good exercise. Let me bring up ISO here, and let's see. We have a bunch of 3200s. This is interesting. Okay. Let me clear this. This coffee and critique just took a turn. Forget complementary colors. Okay, so very interesting. This camera also, you're shooting during the day at ISO 1600, it's going to be, you're going to yield a better result because there's more light to work with. But this looks pretty good for ISO 1600, and we're looking at a D5000, which I believe is an entry-level Nikon DSLR camera. Kudos to you, good sir. I'm not saying that everyone that has a D5000 you could shoot at ISO 1600, but this looks pretty noise-free to me. And then we look at this image here. This is all noise. This is, I think you could see this, especially if you're watching in HD. You could see quite clearly what noise is. This is a good example. And this is shot, I believe, with an iPhone. So iPhones, you can't necessarily control your ISO unless you're using a more advanced app, but you can see very, very clearly how quickly the sensor can't keep up with something like that. That's one we just saw. This also looks a bit grainy, but not terrible. Also, this plate, the grain of this plate probably doesn't help. And that is a 700D Canon, also a DSLR. I don't know why you were shooting at 1600. This looks like midday, and I think that was an accident. And I've done this, okay? You learn the hard way. I did a shoot and during the day, and I came back and I looked at the images, and they were all kind of flat and kind of grainy, and I couldn't figure out why. And I realized I forgot the ISO at 1600, but your camera is still on auto. So your camera is struggling. Your ISO sensitivity is letting in so much light onto the sensor. Your sensor is so sensitive to the light that's hitting it that it's trying to compensate. So you have a 1/8,000th of a shutter, which is probably the max shutter speed. Not the worst thing in the world, you know, but if you do look here, you're seeing some grain. You're definitely seeing some grain in this image that really didn't have to be there. That's the image that started this whole thing. Here we're seeing some grain, but I think you put a noise reduction on here. So the details are a bit softer, you know, and that's the trade-off. You have grain with the detail, or you reduce that grain, but you're also reducing some of that detail. This was shot with a DMC G5, which is a Panasonic DSLR. So again, you want to see your camera, at what point does it start to get noisy where it's not acceptable to your liking. And for your camera, that could be ISO 800, could be 1600, could be 3200. Let's see if we could find another one. Nope, these look pretty good. Rebel T4. I'm impressed. And I think maybe you guys are, okay, so we do see a little bit of noise here. Definitely noisy, but it's not bothering me. I didn't see it in the thumbnail. I think you guys are putting some denoise on in your post-processing software, which is great. You know, a little bit goes a long way, but not too much. Maybe let's go to the ISO 3200 and let's see where we can find some noise. So here we're seeing a lot of noise here. Now at ISO 3200, you're gonna see noise. It's gonna happen. I don't care if you're shooting with a Canon 5D Mark III, which I shoot with, there's still noise. You don't want to shoot at ISO 3200 if you don't have to, even on the high-level cameras. It's just the nature of the beast. That's how the technology works. Canon Rebel T3, entry-level Canon camera, I would say 1600. You're probably 3200 rather. You're probably pushing it much too far for that sensor. Although you pulled it off, and it's not just noise. It does flatten the image. You do lose some detail. You do lose some depth by shooting with a high ISO, and you know, part of it is these the grain takes over some of the pixels, so you're actually losing some information. All right, I feel like I am talking a whole lot, and we did deviate a bit off course. To recap, I think it is a brilliant idea, especially during blue hour, to try and find yourself some complementary colors. Find some orange highlights in the blue, and it'll really give some pop to your image. And as far as ISO sensitivity, do some test shots based on your camera sensor. Find out where you find the photo unacceptable because of the noise, and keep that in mind. Listen, at the end of the day, if it's super dark out and there's a moment happening in front of you that you need to capture, you do whatever it takes, right? If you lower the shutter speed, you're not going to get it. So raise the ISO, you know, max out your aperture, raise the ISO. That if that's what you got to do, go to 6400. Do whatever you got, you know, and you have a grainy shot, but at least you have a shot. Okay, but I'm talking about when you could change, for example, your shutter speed or your aperture. You'll want to do that if you're reaching those ISO levels that you've already deemed unacceptable. All right, guys. I hope you appreciated my under the weather, very deep voice for this screencast. I wonder how many of you realized that I sound a bit like a voiceover artist. Welcome to 52 Frames Weekly Photography Project. Yeah, if you guys don't know about 52 Frames, then I don't know why you're watching this, but definitely head over to 52frames.com and join our free and always free weekly photography project. And until next time, happy shooting.